when I got a slow cooker, it was perhaps around Christmas time last year. I said to my brother, right, what do you want for Christmas? And he said, I'll have a slow cooker. I was like, thinking, okay, that's fine, I'll get you a slow cooker. And I thought, do you know what, that sounds brilliant. I think we should have a slow cooker as well. Idealistic view, do your cooking in the morning, be ready by the time you finish work, fantastic. So I got it, used it perhaps to make a stew, perhaps to make a curry. After a couple of times, it's like, okay, now where are we going to store it? Went in the cupboard. In fact, it didn't go in the cupboard because we didn't have space for it. It went in the garage. Wasn't really used again. That's until I met a lady from Northumberland, from a community organisation, who's been doing loads of these slow cooker workshops, and she really opened my eyes to the sorts of things you can cook in it. And there were two particular things. One that was touched upon, the fact you can make cakes. So I've got a really sweet tooth. The fact you can make cakes in a slow cooker, great, into making that sort of thing. The other thing is that it saves you loads of money, saves energy. And doing what I do, that's what we're all about. So if any of you have got an electric oven, that will cost you about 70p an hour to run. A slow cooker, depends on what size you've got. A smaller one like this, that will cost you no more than about 3p an hour. A bigger one like this, probably about 10p an hour. So even though slow cookers have to be on for a lot longer than an electric oven, it's still going to save you money in the long run. So that's one thing to say about that. You can see here there's two different sizes. I also made, amongst my many mistakes with slow cookers, we'll get one of these massive ones. Okay, how many people are in my house? There's only two. Did we need one that size? Absolutely not. So the thing with slow cookers is that they work much better when they're about 2/3 full. They work more efficiently. It's a bit like, with a freezer. Freezers work much more efficiently when they're full. So if any of you have gaps in your freezer, try and fill it up. Some people put screwed up bits of paper in, perhaps bottles of water, because it's not working as hard to cool down empty spaces. And the same with slow cookers. They're much more efficient when they're about 2/3 full. And then clearly if you've got a smaller one, which is appropriate for your household size, then it's not going to cost you as much to cook things in as well. So that's the first thing. So this one is for up to 2 people. This one is probably over 6 people. We have got some today which are sort of around 4 people, which are some of the ones we've got to sort of give away today. The other thing you'll see on here is that it's pretty basic. You can get all sorts of slow cookers. Some of them have all sorts of different controls and timers and all sorts of things. But I don't know about you, but the more complicated things are, the less likely you are to use them, because do you ever know how everything works on an appliance? No. So the ones we've got are pretty basic. There's only 4 controls on them, and one of those is off. So basically, you've only got 3 things to get to grips with. It's got an on. In fact, one of them's off, one of them's low, one of them's high, and one of them's just to keep it warm. And I think the thing to look at a slow cooker is just like a little oven. So most things you can cook in an oven, you can cook in a slow cooker. So say if you wanted to make a cake in here. We've got some recipe cards that you can take away with you. It's just a case of really mixing up everything. What we'd recommend is, because clearly what you don't want to do, you don't want to make a cake, put it in there and think, oh my God, that's looking amazing. How am I going to get it out? So you're scrabbling around trying to get it out. So what we'd recommend is you to put some sort of greaseproof paper in. You can get the circular ones that are made for baking, but you can also just get some regular greaseproof paper, which I prefer because you can put it in, it covers a bit more area. So pop that in there. What I'll do is I'll just do that. So basically stick that in there like that. And then you mix up all your cake mix, put it in, stick the lid on, and then off you go, okay? So probably in there, cake would take about 2.5 hours to cook. But a couple of things to be aware of. Firstly, if you make sort of pies and things, they talk about not wanting to have a soggy bottom to your pie. Well, with a cake, you don't want a soggy top, do you? You don't want, because when you cook with a slow cooker, you get all that sort of condensation forming on the lid, and you don't want it dripping back down onto the top of your cake. So what you can do, get something like just a sort of clean tea towel, put that over the top like that, and then put the lid on. And what that does, it soaks up all the condensation that's on the lid, and it's not going to drop back down into there. The other thing that you can do is, I don't know if you know much about slow cookers, but it's got a heating element all the way around, all the way around here. But it kind of stops around where the controls are. So what you can do, say after about an hour, is just come and swing the bowl round, like sort of 180 degrees, and then it just cooks evenly like that. So the thing with these, and yesterday I made a fruit cake just to show you what sort of thing it looks like. So this is a fruit cake, and you'll think, and of course you have to taste it because you don't want to come and show people things, so that's why there's a bit missing. It's not chewy, it's very good, but so I had it on yesterday afternoon while I was working, came down, did the swing around, lovely, had the tea towel on top, and then I got caught up on work, and I was like, about an hour later, I was like, oh my God, I should have come and taken that cake out about an hour earlier. So I came down, and it was a bit sort of more burnt around the edges than I would have liked it to have been. But it's not like if that had been in the oven and I'd forgotten about it, the smoke alarms would have been going off and you would have been going, oh God, that's a complete waste. But because it was in here, you can leave things on for longer than you might need to, and it's not going to massively burn. What you could do to try and prevent that sort of burning around the edges, you can remember about it, but also some cakes that you do in here are quite sort of delicate, perhaps more so than that one. Get a bit of foil, stick it in there around the edges, get your greaseproof paper, put that in, and that foil just protects it around the edges, so it's not going to sort of all dry out and burn around there. So that is just a few things to do with that. And what I also do, my partner thinks I'm a bit strange, but gradually getting used to me. You can buy these plug-in electricity meter things. So what you do is you plug that into your socket like that. You plug your appliance in, and it shows you how much it's using. So while I'm cooking in my slow cooker, I've got this plugged in the wall. I've got my slow cooker plugged into that. So which is why I can tell you exactly how long and like how much power it's used. So that would have probably cost me about, I don't know, 7p to cook that cake yesterday. And if it had been in the oven, it would have been, what, 35, 40p? Yeah, so you could make rice pudding quite easily in here. All you'd really have to do is put some pudding rice in. What's that, about 80p? Bit of water, perhaps a bit of sugar, bit of water, that'd be bit of milk, perhaps a little bit of butter and sugar, and just leave it, and it would cook quite nicely. So yeah, a few different things that you can make in there. The other thing with cakes, because if you've not got a little one like that, which makes quite a nice small cake like that, if you've got a bigger one, then you probably don't want to just, even if you put your greaseproof paper in, you don't want to just dump a load of cake mix in there. But you can actually put other things in here. So just like an oven, if you I made a sort of banana bread type cake, put the mix in here and just put that in there and just cooked it like you would in the oven. You probably want to raise it off the floor of the slow cooker, so you don't have to, you could get something a bit bigger than that, but just if you put something on the bottom and put that in, and then that will cook just like it would in the oven. So yeah, the other thing with slow cookers, and you know when you're cooking and you're quite excited about what you're cooking with or what you're making, and you just come over and you go, yeah, looking good, and you just come and do it every like 20 minutes. Try not to do that too much with a slow cooker. Regardless of what you're making, try to resist the temptation to constantly be taking the lid off to look at it. So as soon as you take the lid off, you lose a lot of heat and you have to add on quite a bit to the cooking time. So try just to, as I say, to resist that temptation of constantly taking the lid off. My partner doesn't eat any gluten, which is a nightmare when it comes to cooking things. So I found this really good recipe online for gluten-free bread. And what you actually did is you can take this out and you can cook just in this. And when I first saw this recipe online, I was like, that just doesn't seem right. And I was put off doing it, and I thought, well, they know better than me, to be honest. So I did try it, and it did make, again, raise it off the ground, pop that in, and then you've got a really good loaf of bread afterwards. Just cooks things slower. So, has anyone got anything they want to ask so far? Yes, jacket potatoes. So I was going to come on to them, but no, absolutely. Again, jacket potatoes, because it's all trial and error. And again, I was probably like, jacket potatoes, really? And what I normally do with jacket potatoes is pop them in the microwave, perhaps for about 10 minutes. So then when you do put them in the oven, you don't have to have it on as long. But I did try them, 2 jacket potatoes in here, without putting them in the microwave or anything, just putting them straight in there. Did put them in a bowl first, rub them in a bit of oil, bit of salt, put them in there, and after about 3 hours they were cooked and they were nice. They don't get the crispy skin, but you can absolutely do them in there. So you could make things like porridge. If any of you eat porridge in the mornings, you could put porridge. Yeah, you could put that on the night before, on low. And because you can leave slow cookers on, like overnight, or if you go out during the day. So yeah, you could set that off the night before, and then when you get up for breakfast, it's all good to go. Porridge, pretty easy, isn't it, to make? A few porridge oats and a bit of milk, and then good to go the next morning. Okay, so if we move on to sort of, because I guess stews and curries and things are the things that a lot of people would use these for. There's always a bit of a debate about whether you should do things like brown off meat before you put it in the slow cooker. And I would personally do that because I don't like the thought of just putting meat straight into there. But you don't have to. You could just put it all in there, but it won't brown. Things won't brown in a slow cooker like they would if you were sort of frying it or something like that. So I would typically brown off the meat. But if you do look up recipes that tell you to brown off meat, sometimes they send, right, brown off the onions, brown off the mushrooms, brown off this, that and the other. And you think, surely the whole point of a slow cooker is you can just whack it all in and not have to do all this cooking and then have all that washing up to do. So I think perhaps meat, but personal choice, you don't have to, but you know, perhaps that's a good thing to do. You get a different flavour if it's browned off, perhaps a richer flavour. And the other thing to say as well, I mean, I've already said that there's the low and the high settings. If you can put it on low, it will take longer, but again, the flavours sort of come through more. So it depends how organised you are in terms of, yeah, not like me probably, but if you put it on in the morning and you can have it on all day, then the flavours will come through on that. And I think the other thing to say with these is that you're heating. Like it's like if you use your oven, it's always a good thing to think, like, I'm putting my oven on, what else do I need to cook? Do it all at once, because you're paying to heat your oven. So, you know, there's no point cooking your meal, then an hour later think, God, I'd really like to make a dessert, and then putting that in the oven. Try and think what you can do at the same time. And it's the same with a slow cooker. Like, you could do more than one thing in here at the same time. So Christine, who I was saying, who sort of, we're working them, these sessions are based on the model that she does. She was saying that a chap came to one of her sessions and she said to him, oh, what do you eat? And he said, oh, well, I don't really eat anything since his wife died, and all he was eating was like ham sandwiches, and that was it. So she said, right, well, here you go. Here's a slow cooker. And what he was buying was those sort of plastic packets where you get like 4 or 5 slices that cost like quite a lot of money for very little. She's like, right, go and just buy like a joint, like gammon joint, stick it in there, and takes a little bit of water in the bottom, a couple of hours, 3 hours perhaps on that, and there you go, you've got that, and you can use that with other things. And the other thing, do any of you eat peas pudding? So what you can do, because quite often if you make peas pudding and it turns out like a yellow sort of mush, yeah, thank you, a yellow mush. Yeah, but it's quite often eaten with like gammon or something, ham or something like that. So what you could do while you've got your gammon joint in there, you could make yourself a peas pudding, and you can try this and see whether it tastes better than the one that you've done before. So you'd need to put these in something. These are so cheap to buy. So perhaps put them in like a little container like that, pour them in, and while you've got your joint in the water cooking away, you can cook those at the same time. And it soaks up all the juices. And I did try it, but I've never had it before, so I don't know whether it tasted better than what you'd get anyway. But apparently it does. So yeah, but you're cooking 2 things at the same time while it's on. And what you can also buy, you can buy these like slow cooker liners. Have you? Yeah. So they're really cheap to buy. Some people will buy them if you really hate washing up, and you can put it in here and you can cook your food in it, and then you can throw it away. I mean, I don't personally think that's particularly environmentally sustainable, but you know, each their own. But what you can use them for, is use it to like split up the slow cooker, so you could potentially cook 2 things in it at the same time. So again, you're paying for it to be used, So why not see what else you can put in? So, you know, put that in one side. Perhaps if you're making something like, I don't know, chili or curry, something like that, you could cook that in there. And then in the other side, you mentioned jacket potatoes, you could do those in the other side. You could make things like wedges in the same way as jacket potatoes. I mean, you can cook sort of things like rice in here as well. You just have to keep sort of a bit of a closer eye on it. But basically using it to cook other things at the same time while you're paying for the electric to run it.
If you wrapped it up, would it steam it, Mark?
It would, yeah.
You could put salmon or something in, or some fish.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't think you probably need to have that on for very long, but yeah, absolutely. And the thing, I mean, you could, if you've got a really good recipe that you love making in the oven, there's no reason why you can't make it in there. But there are a couple of differences. I think the first key difference is that liquid doesn't evaporate as much in there as it does if you're doing something in the oven or on the stove. So if you've got a recipe that asks for, like, I don't know, say a litre of stock or something like that, perhaps cut down what you put in, at least half, because it's just going to stay there. And what you don't want to get is to the end and you keep looking in it but not lifting the lid off because you're not doing that, and it just looks really watery. So it's much easier to put less liquid in to start with and add to it than get to the end and think, God, I'm going to have to try and reduce that down, and it all becomes a bit of a nightmare. So definitely reduce down the amount of liquid you put in if you are using a recipe. But if you do go online, there's all sorts of websites you can go on to find different sort of slow cooker recipes. Apparently the only things you can't make in here, which I've not tried but I have it on good authority, like Yorkshire puddings. So if any of you make Yorkshire puddings, apparently, because it just doesn't get to that temperature you need. So you probably need to make those in your air fryer if you've got one of those. But yeah, all sorts of possibilities. If any of you are on Facebook, there's a really good page on Facebook called Bored of Lunch, and it's Bored of Lunch, and it's a chap who puts out loads of slow cooker recipes, all sorts of ideas for what you can make in there. I mean, I know some people have made things like pizzas in there. I know. So I think the thing with pizza, it's a bit like a cake as well, isn't it? You don't want to make your pizza in there and then think again, right, how am I going to get that out? Like, I've got this lovely pizza. So you can actually buy online what's called like a slow cooker sling, and it's like this plastic thing with a handle, and you put that in, and then you put whatever you're cooking on top of it. So you can do this with the cake, but you can buy one of those. I'm not sure whether or not you actually need to, because you could sort of create your own. So if you had, say, a couple of bits of greaseproof paper, you could put one that way, and then just put whatever you're cooking on top of it. And then when it's ready, you could just lift it out. And I know Christine, again, she'd run one of these with some young lads who basically were about to move into their first house but had no idea how to cook anything, basically. And she came up with this recipe around this pizza pasta thing. So basically, put a load of pasta in the bottom, mixed it up with your pasta sauce, said to them, right, what sort of pizza ingredients do you like? Stuck them on top, put mozzarella cheese on top, and it just melts nicely. And these, I think she said, well, these lads, that's all they eat now. But at least they're sort of cooking. Pasta doesn't take very long in there, but you can cook it in there. I have to say, I did try that pasta pizza thing in here, and it did look amazing. It smelled delicious, but it cooked faster than I thought. And then I came back to it like for lunchtime basically, and I'd forgotten to take the lid off and all this condensation had dropped onto it and it didn't look as appetizing. But with a lot of these things you just learn, and it's just trial and error. So if you said to me how to cook this, I'll probably say I don't know, but just try it, look up a recipe. And I think the thing with slow cookers, you can buy cheaper cuts of meat, and actually cheaper cuts of meat actually work better in there than the more expensive ones. So I don't know, something like beef brisket or something, or shoulder of like lamb shoulder, pork shoulder, something like that. They cook better and they're on for longer, and then when you take them out they just sort of pull apart and sort of melt in your mouth. Just cuts of sort of beef, like stewing those chunks that you buy. So because it's cheaper, you're saving on what you're buying, you're saving on how much it's costing you to cook. So overall, let's face it, we're all looking to save money, aren't we, this winter? So hopefully this is one way that would help you.